I'm Brent Jeffries, Vice President of Field Operations, Safety Trainer with Bierer Meters. And we started this about 2 years ago, Electroculture of Safety about 2 years ago. And there was a handful of folks that I went to and presented this idea to get started about 2 years ago. And Mr. Mack Turner was one of them. And Mr. Jimmy Vaughn, I remember sitting at a table, we had a beer, and I told these guys my idea. And I didn't know if these guys were going to tell me to pack sand or what they were going to say. But gave them the idea, and 2 years ago, they just instantly jumped in and wanted to be part of this. And folks, the ISPC, right there, your partners in safety, that is so true. And their passion and their desire to bring their experience and share their love for this most excellent industry is bar none. And I consider Mack Turner, I just consider a few folks this way, but I consider Mack Turner a line legacy. So this is going to be wonderful, and he's a bud of mine, great person, and he makes the best elk jerky in the world. I was able to taste that this morning. So y'all stay tuned and enjoy. Mack, appreciate everything, brother.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful day, because it is a wonderful day. You know, every day that we wake up, if we've got the right attitude, once we wake up, we know that the day is going to be a good day. And, you know, attitude is so much a part of what we do every day. So I'm very happy to be here. I want to thank Bierer Meters and Brent for inviting me here. I always enjoy coming back here and visiting and get to talk with them on what they're doing to help the industry. So today, as Brent said, our training is on can training and accountability reduce incidents. Now, my first slide is kind of my first slide in about everything. It's what is our number one task? And I've got a little acronym. It's called SALT. In other words, save a life today. To me, there's no more important task. There's nothing more important than doing that each and every day. And if we don't take care of each other, if we don't have each other's back, if we don't do everything we can, both on and off the job, to keep people safe, then I think that we've failed for the day. And that's just my belief. Because if we don't take care of each other, the work's not going to get done. People are going to get hurt. And it's just going to really not be a good thing. So as I talk about this stuff today, I want you to keep in mind that this Save a Life today is really the backbone of everything. So let's get into this a little bit on training and accountability. I want to go through the definitions here first. So training, according to Webster, it says it's the act of teaching a person a particular skill or type of behavior. And, you know, we all need that training. So it's important. And according to Webster, accountability is the fact or condition of being accountable or responsibility. And being accountable is required or expected to justify actions, decisions, be responsible, the obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions or inactions. Now, accountability plays a big part in our life. And we're going to talk more about this as we continue forward. So let's start here with some training stuff. So there's this term, common sense versus common knowledge. And I hear people tell me all the time, oh, I got a coworker, you don't have any common sense. Well, let's kind of dissect that a little bit. So I got a question. Are we born with either one, common sense or common knowledge? Is that something that we are born to this earth with either one? Now, I've got my own opinion, and you guys might have, I'm sure you've got your own. But let's talk about common sense. I hear things like, that person has no common sense. Is it true? Well, I'm not a believer in common sense. And I'll tell you why. When we were little and we were at our mother's apron strings, Mom was usually in the kitchen. And when she'd turn on that stove to cook something, and you'd see that pretty blue flame or that nice orange coil, what did all of us want to do? We wanted to reach up and touch it. And what did our mother do? She slapped her hands and says, hey, that's hot, don't do it, it'll hurt you. So did we have knowledge that that would hurt us when we were young? No, we got trained. Our mother trained us that that would hurt us. And a lot of us, me included, when Mom wasn't looking, what did we do? And that was training as well, because we found out that that's something that was hot that could hurt us. So I don't believe common sense. It's just not anything that I can deal with in my mind. But common knowledge. So what is common knowledge? And do we all have it? So knowledge comes from training, just like our mother trained us. And everything we do, whether it's mow the lawn or take out the trash or we come to work and we do line work, we all have to be trained on what is expected of us, and we all deserve that training. So we do have common knowledge because that's how we progress through life. And as we progress through life, our knowledge bank greatly expands. But I still believe that there's nothing to common sense. It is common knowledge. So common knowledge or training is a tool. It's part of our toolbox that we have as we do line work every day. If we work in the utility industry, training is a big part of it. So both at work and off work, we all have tools that assist us in accomplishing tasks. And this is just one of those. And training, I think, is one of the most important things. So tasks are the little things that allow us to get the overall job complete. So if we go out in the field and we're assigned to put a new guy on a pole, do we inherently know how to do that? Is that common sense? But it is common knowledge. So we have been trained how to do that and do it successfully, and more importantly, how to do it safely. So just that little task is something that we have been trained on, that we need to be trained. Now there's all kinds of training. Now when I came into the business, it was, hey, watch that journeyman right there and watch what he does. And you'll learn from what he does. And that is one way. Now I believe that that's an important way, but I think there's some more important ways to learn those tasks. So getting through each day successfully requires us to use the tools we have to complete the tasks. So we have a toolbox, we have our hooks, we have a safety belt, we have hot gloves, we have leather gloves, we have a hard hat, we have all of these things. And then we've got drills and we've got wrenches and we've got other kinds of tools. But the training that we have is a tool. It is a tool that allows us to not only be successful and get the job done, but to get it done safely and be able to go on to the next task. Training on how to complete tasks makes us successful. So you can watch somebody and get a lot out of how to complete that successfully. But there's other types of training as well. And as adults, we know that adults learn in different ways. And so in order for us adults to learn something new, it's got to appeal to one of those three things that we know that the way that adults learn from. So we need to make sure that our training encompasses those things. So therefore, training is really important. I believe it's kind of the backbone of what we do every day, whether it's on the job or whether it's off the job. Because if we're not trained, and we just try to bully our way through it or hope that we're doing it right, more often than not, something's going to go wrong. We're not going to have a good outcome. Either we're going to do something bad to the system, which is, costly in that, but more importantly, we deserve to be trained on how to be successful and do our tasks successfully. So what about training as a right? Do we have a right to be trained? So we can talk all day about that, and I'm sure maybe some HR departments might have a different outlook on things, or people that's been in operations, but I look at training as a right. We have the right as an individual to be trained, to be able to accomplish our tasks first safely, and two, to get the job done as needed. So to me, training is a right, and we have a right to demand training. That's my thought process. But when do we start training? Well, we started it the day we were born. Now, we don't remember any of that first training. We had to grow a little before we started to remember some of that training, but our mom slapping our hand was training. And everything that we've gone through life, we've gotten trained on in one type or another. So is there different kinds of training? And yeah, there is. There's a lot of different kinds of training. You can watch somebody. You can sit in a classroom. You can go out and perform skills or proficiency. You can just be told. Somebody can tell you over the telephone. There's a lot of different kinds of training. But the most effective training for most people in our trades, and this is for all trades, just not the utility, is kinesthetic, like to touch and feel. But we've got to take care of that knowledge portion as well. But we deserve that training. And we know that there's lots of different types, and we need to embrace all of those. And so next bullet point, training curriculum versus on-the-job training, and do we need both? And yes, doesn't hurt any of us to study and take a written test, because that kind of proves to us as well as other people that we've gotten that knowledge and we've retained it into our lives. The second thing is on the job. And I tell people all the time, our customers and that, you can't learn to climb a pole out of a book or off a video. You know, you can go to YouTube and watch people doing it, but until you actually get out there to a pole and you put your hooks on, you put your safety belt on, and you start climbing that pole and descending on that pole and working off that pole, it takes some time to do that. It's not going to happen overnight. There's some things that you can get, yeah, I got it, but climbing a pole and a lot of other tasks are things that you've got to go and experience to get it done right. So, next question, do we need to be trained before we can be assigned a task? And in 1910-269, which is OSHA's most vertical standard for us in the utility industry, the answer is yes. We have to be trained. And that's one of the rights that we have, but number two, it's the law. Before your employer can assign you a task, they've got to make sure that you know how to accomplish that task and accomplish it safely. Now, what about retraining? Well, folks, I'm older than, my kids say that I'm older than dirt, but I can tell you I've forgot a lot of things over the years. And it's kind of human nature that if we don't do something repeatedly for a while, and we haven't done something for a while, we kind of forget sort of the specifics of it and all of the nuances that we've got to do that. So retraining is important. You know, we might have a journeyman certificate and 20 years have gone by and maybe we haven't gone to a transformer bank and done any troubleshooting for a while, and you know, we really deserve to be, and we need to focus on retraining or re-upping our knowledge and our skills before we get up in the hot stuff and do something that's going to get somebody hurt. So we have to focus on retraining as well, and that's not something that our industry has done a very good job with. And we see it, our company sees it all the time, both in utilities and on the construction crews, that, well, okay, we got a journeyman certificate, it's good, I don't have to be retrained on any of these skills or any of these things that we need to know. And I've talked to a lot of people in our industry that once they got their journeyman certificate, they've had very little training after that. And we can't allow that, because we need to keep people safe and alive. So this is something that a lineman asked me here a few years ago. He says, can I plead the fifth if I haven't been trained? He says, you know, I just kind of been around here and I've learned to do a few things just by watching people. He says, so I'm okay, right? Well, I don't think that guy's all right. I told him he deserved more than that. And he needed to stand up and make sure that he was given the training that he needed to do the task safely and successfully. So we can't have that attitude of, well, I'll just watch and do this and hopefully everything will go right. We just can't make it happen. And do we have the right to be trained at work? And that is yes. OSHA stipulates that. I don't think an HR department would disagree with that at all. We see people all the time that have very minimal training. We encounter people sometimes that hasn't ever had any training. I talked to a customer not too long ago that was in the telecom side of things, and they'd never had any training on getting up into that energized electrical space up on a pole. Not in the history of their company, and it was a 60-year-old company. And we helped them fix that because we do have the right to be trained. So is there a difference between good and bad training? Well, there is. Now, years ago when I was told to watch that journeyman and see what he did, he taught me an awful lot of what I needed to know, but he also taught me his bad habits. And I watched him do some things, and then what was ironic to me was, 6 months later, when I performed a task just exactly like I'd watched him do it, I got in trouble for it because I wasn't doing it right. So we've got to really understand enough about training and understand that sometimes, we got to take some time out and say, no, this isn't right. Let's go back and let's make sure we got this right before we proceed. What about training being tailored to the way you learn? I talked about adult learning principles here a little bit earlier. So we have visual, audio, and kinesthetic. Those are the 3 adult training ways. And not all of us will key in on all 3. Usually we key in on one, and then the other 2 is a little bit less. So if you're a kinesthetic learner, you're still going to have to pass the knowledge test. But you're a hands-on guy. If you're a visual learner, watching a video will do an awful lot. Or listening to a video or a training would appeal to the audio people. But if you combined all of those, then you're going to retain that knowledge a whole lot better, a whole lot longer. So is it my responsibility to make sure that I've been trained properly? Well, I don't know what you guys think, but I don't hold anybody accountable for my actions. I've always been one that's been the guy sitting back and making sure that I understood everything before I went to do a task. Because I didn't, I learned early on in my career, this term, I'm my brother's keeper, but I didn't see it happening out on the job. And I still don't. After all of these years, I don't see that principle happening out on the job. And often when we investigate instances, somebody will come up to us and say, yeah, I knew Jack was going to get hurt. Yeah, I knew that. I've watched him do this for years. It's just a matter of time before he got hurt. And we hear that all of the time. And I just don't believe that way. I am going to make sure that I'm going to take care of my safety. I am going to take responsibility for that. It's nobody else's responsibility. It is mine. And I'm going to make sure that I know what I'm doing and that I can do it safely. That's nobody's responsibility but mine. And we all need to take that upon ourselves to make sure that we look out for number one, because I don't care how good your pole buddy is or anything. There's nothing like taking personal responsibility, and that's not just on the job. That is every day, 24/7. We've just got to do it. So, last bullet point on this slide is the dirty diaper. A lot of us have found a mate, and we've got a family, and we've got kids. Now, I grew up, I was the youngest in my family. So until my older siblings started having kids, I didn't have to deal with the dirty diaper. But I can remember the first time I was asked to change a dirty diaper, and I was a teenager. And nobody told me how to do it or anything. So getting the diaper off my niece was not a bad thing. And I could figure out how to kind of clean things up a little bit. But I did a cardinal sin, I found out, is I just threw that dirty diaper in a trash can. And anyway, the outcome wasn't very good here by the end of the day. And, so I told my sister, I says, well, you should have told me how to do it and what to do it. She says, well, that's something we should all know. So a simple act like that, all of us, when we've had kids and that, we've had to figure out tasks on our own because nobody's going to teach you how to change a dirty diaper. So how do we apply that out into the field? There's some dirty jobs that we have to do, that we're assigned to do, things that we really don't want to do. And we've all done some of those. And you're going to get very little training on it, but then we got to go back and we got to demand that training to make sure that we can do it safely and successfully. And those dirty jobs out there are going to happen. So let's move into accountability. Growing up, were you ever held accountable for something? Well, most of us were. Now, I grew up rural on a farm and a ranch. And when I did something wrong, and I can't remember, I had to be maybe 4 or 5 years old when I did something wrong, my dad would take his pocket knife out of his pocket, and we had willows along a creek up above our house about, I'd say 1/4 mile from our house, and he'd send me up there to cut my own willow. So I would go and figure out which one of those willows was going to hurt the least. And I would cut a willow and I'd bring it back and hand my dad his pocket knife, and then instead of spanking me, he would just take that willow and give me a couple of good whacks. And me and my sisters, we got very good at trying to find a willow that hurt the least. Now, that was one of my dad's versions of holding me accountable. So my dad had something that as an adult I've learned to understand. People make all kinds of decisions to do different things, whether they're good or bad. And when we do things that are good, then we get reinforced that, hey, this was good, I like the outcome of this. And when we do something that's bad, human nature says we're going to try and look and, nobody saw me do that, so I'm not going to say anything. We're going to just go on like it never happened. Well, I believe that we need to be held accountable because if you've had kids, you know that you cannot change their behavior unless the consequences get strong enough or big enough, whether they're good or bad consequences. The rewards, people will change to make that good reward happen every time. But when something is bad, something goes wrong, we as humans, human nature says we're going to try and hide that and get out of it. That spotlight, you see the movie where they've got a spotlight in a dark room and a guy sitting in a chair and they got guys questioning him. People will do anything to get out of that spotlight. You don't want it, so we're going to try and shirk that. But how can we grow if we're not held accountable? How can we get better? So I believe that we need to be held accountable for everything we do. And I know that we won't change until that bar gets high enough that we will voluntarily change our behavior. Now, again, us that's raised kids, if a spank don't work, well, then we resort to something else to change behavior, whatever we do with our kids. Reward, lots of different things, and it bleeds over into the workplace. But we deserve as humans to be held accountable because that's the only way we'll grow. Because if we can be held accountable on the little things, maybe we popped the circuit, but we didn't get hurt, okay? We still deserve to be held accountable for that so that we'll change our behavior so that that won't happen again. Nobody got hurt, but something happened. So do we like being held accountable? The answer is no, we don't. Us humans, we don't like being held accountable. We want to get the pats on the back and all of that, but that willow is a pretty tough thing to be held accountable to. But we need to step up. And when we do something wrong at work or at home, hey, it was me. I was the one. Now I'm going to take this as a growth opportunity, and we're going to learn and we're going to get better. So what lessons do we learn by being held accountable or not being held accountable? So if we are held accountable, is that something that grows us professionally and personally? And I think that we grow both professionally and personally by being held accountable. I think it's one of the best ways to help us grow. And if we are not being held accountable, then we're going to be the people that's hiding at work and at home. That's just human nature. It's just going to be that way. So is being held accountable easy? And it's not. It is really hard to raise your hand and say, hey guys, it was me. I did this wrong. You know, because we don't want to be looked down on by people, but I have found over the years, if you're willing to step up at work and at home to being held accountable, nobody's going to look down on you. If they do, they're doing the wrong thing. What you're going to find out is everybody's going to start respecting you because you step up and do the right thing. And that gains you a lot of respect both at work and at home. So, being held accountable, is it worth it? And I think it is. I know that's just my opinion, but I think it's really important that we as adults, we as leaders, both at home and at work, we need to be accountable. And do we often find ways to stop being held accountable? And the answer to that's yes. We do. It's human nature. But we've got to step up and minimize those. So, the effects of no accountability. What do we learn when we're not held accountable? Well, that adage of, I'm my brother's keeper, and then somebody comes to you and says, hey, I knew that Jack was going to get hurt. You know, nothing's going to be gained by that. So have the things that we've learned assisted us in the future? And the answer to that's yeah. If we're held accountable and we continue to hold ourselves accountable, we become a better person. We become a better worker for our employer. We have a confidence. Our co-workers are going to respect us. And at home, things are going to go so much easier. You know, our kids are really smart and they really look to their parents for a lot of things. And if you're not accountable in their eyes for something that goes wrong, that you had skin in the game with, it's going to affect your kids, which will affect them as adults. So this is a 24/7 thing. Does not being held accountable assist us in being a better person and professional? And yes, it does. And are there negative effects when we are not held accountable? And yeah, there is. We get away with something one time, twice, three times. Maybe you'll do a task the same way because of your unsafe behavior, and one time it'll get you when it didn't before. You know, I was a few years ago, I was in New York State out on Long Island for a customer. And as I was traveling out there, it was a rush hour in the evening. And so I was on the freeway, and out there on that freeway, the speed limit was 55 miles an hour. So I'm going to do that. And I can tell you that day, me going 55 miles an hour down that freeway, everybody was honking at me, and the signs and the gestures that I saw toward me were varied. And pretty quick, I looked in my rear view mirror and I could see those red and white lights going off, so I pulled off the road, and this officer came up to me and he says, "Can I see your license and registration?" So I provided that for him, and he went back to his car and he came up with a piece of paper and said, "Sign here." A lot of us have been through that kind of thing. And I asked him, well, what for? And he says, you are impeding traffic. So I got a ticket. I didn't have to pay anything, but he told me I needed to go with the flow of the traffic. Now, the traffic was going 75, 80 miles an hour down this 55 speed limit road, which is pretty common in lots of areas of the country. But he taught me a valuable lesson about being accountable. Was I doing the right thing by going 55, 56 miles an hour? Well, I can kind of say, yeah, I was doing the right thing, but was I doing the safest thing? And so that was the conversation I had with this officer. So I says, so are you telling me that I will be safer and those people out on the road will be safer if I travel the same speed they're traveling? And he says, absolutely. So I understood after that time, sometimes we've got to look at the overall right and the overall good in things. And yes, I was impeding traffic. I definitely was. But was I following the rules? Yeah, I was. Did I really get hurt by it? No, I didn't. You know, the piece of paper is just a piece of paper. No consequences to it. But could I have been the cause of somebody who maybe wasn't paying attention? So I've gone over that conversation in my mind so many times in the last 5 or 6 years since that happened. And would I do it again? Would I go 55 miles an hour down the road and follow the rule of law? Or would I choose in that environment again to look out not only for my safety but other people's safety? So I've had to ask myself, well, what was the right choice that day? And some of you might think that I'm completely wrong, but I've kind of decided in my mind that that officer was right. Because the safest thing to do and the right thing to do was, I didn't have to be the first dog going there and passing everybody, but I didn't need to be there where everybody had to slow down and honk and move around me either. So sometimes we've got to make choices that kind of maybe need to think about a little bit. Okay, are there negative effects when we're not held accountable? And yes, I think we've discussed a lot of those. Folks, we deserve to be held accountable. We can't not be. But do we do things as a team and then the team is accountable? Yes or no? So you're working out on a crew. You got a little team there. And something happens and somebody makes a mistake and we drop a circuit or something else happens. Well, I was just doing what everybody on the team was doing. So let's dissect that in our mind. If you're not the one standing up and saying, hey, time out, guys, we're going to get hurt, something's going to happen here, we got to step back and we got to do this right, we got to do it the safest way possible, because there's always more than one way to do a task. So we're going to do it the safest way. We're not going to tolerate this unsafe behavior. Are you going to get yelled at by your team members? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe they'll come to respect you as being the one that, hey, I'm part of the team, so not only am I holding myself accountable, I'm going to assist other people in being accountable as well, because we don't want to get anybody hurt. And we see a lot of customers and a lot of safety policy in that, and it's always, you know, we got this timeout policy, you know, where we take time out, but when you talk to people, is it actually happening out there? Not very often. There's some companies and some workforces that get it, but there's an awful lot that don't. So let's stand up and be accountable when we see unsafe behavior. Let's stop work. Let's hold the others to that same standard in our crew. I don't care if you're the second-year apprentice and you've got a bunch of journeymen you're working with. We need to take that initiative to, one, hold ourselves accountable, and number two, assist others in being safe. So accountability at home and at work. As kids, we learned what accountability was. Okay, I learned with that little willow that I had to go cut. And it didn't hurt me at all. You know, when I was little, I used to tear up and cry a little. But as I progressed and got to be a teenager and then went away from home, I am very thankful that my father held me accountable. He was the one that held us accountable as kids. And it didn't hurt us at all. And I know there's some people who say, oh, we can't spank or we can't do anything. But we've got to start this accountability process as we're kids. Because as we grow up and we go out into the workforce, we get away from home and that, the things that can hurt us are so much, there's so many more of them, and they have such a higher magnitude. As adults, accountability is part of each day. And I really believe that it should be part of each and every day. We need to take it upon ourselves from the time we get up in the morning till we go to bed at night to hold ourselves accountable and to assist those around us with the same principle. I'm not telling you that you've got to run your kids, your family's lives, or your co-workers' lives. But if you set the example that you're going to take that upon yourself, hey, it was me, boss, or hey, John, I know you're only 12, but I made a mistake here, so let's step back and let's go down this road the right way. It's something that we've got to do each and every day, all day long. And yes, as adults, we deserve to be held accountable. That's one of the things that we see going around the country and the world, is that a lot of us in our industry are really not held accountable. And we can debate this all day long. And there's a lot of times that I'll agree to disagree with people. But I think if we really look deep into our heart, we understand that as adults, and especially when we interact at work and at home, we need to hold ourselves accountable. We've got to accept that accountability. It's hard. It's not easy. And we all do. I make mistakes all the time. I'm far from perfect. But I'm not going to get better and make less mistakes if I don't hold myself accountable. If I just slough it off, it's not going to do me any good, and it's not going to do those people around me. And as adults, if we don't accept accountability, one, we're going to lose respect of those people around us, whether it's our families, our co-workers, whatever. And then the worst thing is we're more likely to get hurt. So we've done a task one way for 10 years and nothing's happened. And that little Swiss model, that cheese model that comes around and all of a sudden the stars line up and then something happens. We don't ever want to get to that point here. So let's talk about incidents at work and at home. So an incident to me is anything that is unexpected or that we don't plan on that goes wrong. It could be backing the truck into a pylon and bending the bumper on the truck. Nobody got hurt. Wasn't a big thing, but it was still an incident. Or it could be somebody cutting their finger just enough. You got to go get a Band-Aid, clean it up, and put a Band-Aid on it. Or things that happen much worse. That's an incident. So I don't like the term accidents, because that implies that we did something wrong. But an incident kind of covers it all. So when an incident occurs, should we investigate and define causal factors? And a lot of you have had training and know what causal factors are. But yes, we need to investigate those incidents. It's important that we, even the little small ones, that little bent bumper or something that didn't happen. So another story here, long in my career, I was put over operational control of a coal and ash crew at one of our power production plants. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, they called me out. There was a problem, so I drove my truck out into the middle of the coal field and met with a bunch of people. Just rolled down the window and met with them. And it was apparent that I needed to get out of my truck and go look at something. So I did what a lot of us have probably done. Didn't realize that I hadn't put that vehicle in park. I took my foot off the brake, I opened the door, and as I put one foot on the ground, the truck started rolling forward. And so I just jumped right back in, put it in park, no harm, no nothing, right? Went and investigated what needed to happen, went home. Well, the next morning, we started work at 6 a.m., so as I was walking between my truck and my office, I had 3 people stop me and say, "Hey, I heard what happened last night, ha ha ha," you know. Well, what they didn't know was I pulled a site safety stand down. So at 6:01, everybody on site was tuned in, and I made sure that everybody in my crews and then my supervisor, the guy that I reported to, was right there. And I just got up in front of everybody and I says, "I know that you've heard that there was an incident in the coal yard last night, and it was me. And this is what I did. And I did something wrong. It was a safety violation. It could have gotten somebody hurt. In this case, nobody did, but that doesn't make me any less accountable just because nobody got hurt. It was me. I did it." And then I turned to my supervisor and I says, "Okay, I am up for whatever disciplinary policy that you have. I'm just like these guys out here. I deserve to be held accountable." What do you think that did to the workforce and everybody that day? Instead of laughing at me, ha 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 ha, I had countless people over the next 3 or 4 days come up to me and say, "Hey man, we appreciate you stepping up. It showed us what we need to do." And my supervisor, he made me write a company newsletter about it. And so that was my accountability. But a little thing, nobody got hurt, something that we all tend to do, little things like that. So we did a causal factor investigation on it, what allowed that to happen. And okay, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I just got out of a deep sleep and, we went through all these causal factors, but we investigated it to identify them all. Could training or the lack thereof be a causal factor? So how many of you ever had training, official training, to when you go to get out of a vehicle that you put it in park, put the emergency brake on and turn it off or whatever before you get out of the car? Have you ever had any formal training like that? I haven't. I've had some formal CDL training and some other heavy equipment operator training, but nothing like that in any of them. Because we don't think about that. We think, well, that guy's got common sense, he ought to know that anyway. Well, sometimes we got to look at those little things and remind people of those little things that can happen. Is there sometimes a possibility that lack of accountability causes incidents to happen? Well, I think there are. I think an awful lot of the times it's like that guy coming up to me and say, "I knew that Jack was going to get hurt. It was just a matter of time." It's going to cause, things can go wrong. So I want to tell you another little story. Years ago I had a welder working for me, and he was horrible at safety classes. He got disciplined. We had a progressive disciplinary policy. He was disciplined and gone through the 3-step disciplinary process and released from duty, in other words, lost his job. 6 months would go by, they'd hire him back, and he would start up the disciplinary policy. He'd done that 3 times in his career for the same company. And one day, it was on a Saturday night, just after dark, I got a phone call. And it was him, and he says, "Mac," he says, "I need to go to the doctor." He says, "I got something in my eye." I said, "Did it happen at work?" And he says, "Yeah, it happened at work." And so I says, I'll meet you down to the doctor's office. So I made a couple of phone calls. I met him, and I told him to bring his wife along with him. And he says, "Why?" And I says, "Well, we don't know what the doctor's going to do. You might not be able to drive to go home." Now, that was a valid reason for asking him to bring his wife with him, but I had some other reasons. So we get him, and back then in the day, they brought him in, they laid him down on a table. Doctor looked in his eye and says, "Yeah, you got a metal shaving in your eye. But it's been in there 2 or 3 days, so you got a rust ring around it. So we're going to have to get it out." So he just plucked that little shaving, metal shaving out. This guy went to get up, and the doctor says, no. He says, "I need you to lay down here." He says, "We've got to remove that rust ring." So they laid him down, and they actually strapped his head down, chin and his forehead, and then put a strap over his body. And, "Well, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, we can't have you move when we're doing this." So then they brought in a little machine that looked like a miniature drill press. And as this little twist drill, which is what it really was, got close to this guy's eye, he started screaming and yelling. This is a big old burly welder. And that quick it was over. They was able to remove that rustering so his eye could heal the way that it should. And so he got up and they unstrapped him and sitting in a chair, and his wife was patting his hand and, you know, how is everything and all of that. And so the doctor came in, and I'd kind of prepped him a little and says, okay, I got to fill out a report here. It's workers' comp. So when did it happen? Well, it happened Thursday morning. Did you report it? No. Why not? Oh, this happens all the time. So we went through all of that, filled out the paperwork. About the time he got done talking, his wife stood up, grabbed him right here by the shirt. She was about that far in front of his face and says, you are endangering your ability to provide for me and our children. You will not do that behavior ever again. Now, all the times that he'd gotten disciplined and let go, and he'd come back to work, the bar was not high enough. But that conversation with his wife changed him, because Monday morning, he came in my office first thing, he says, we got to have a safety stand-up. Okay. So we gathered everybody together, and he got up in front of everybody and told about his experience. And told everybody, which everybody knew, that he'd been let go a couple of times and come back. He's a long time on and off employee and all of that. But he just told everybody, he says, if you ever see me without my safety glasses on, anybody out there, and there was about 300 people in that room, he says, if anybody sees me without safety glasses on again, he says, you come and tell me, and if I don't react the right way, I says, you kick my butt. And he told them, and I'm going to expect the same from every one of you folks. And he was the best person. If a person was not wearing their proper PPE, or if they was doing an unsafe behavior, from that day forward, he was the best employee that way that we ever had. And he retired with honors and was very well respected because he stood up there. But what changed him was not all the times that he was disciplined at work. What changed him was that conversation with his wife. It finally the bar got raised high enough that he had to pay attention. So training and incidents. Can we prevent incidents by defining, identifying, and facilitating proper training? Yes, we can. Now, we all usually, when we come into a workplace, have initial training. We have an in-service training. We don't often get refresher training or continuing education. But we need to focus on this. It doesn't matter who you are, what your experience is, or how long you've been at work. We deserve all of this training before you're assigned a new task. Now, OSHA says something in 1910-269 that says that if you have not done or been assigned a task in the last year, you must be retrained before you can be assigned that task. Now, that's a very powerful statement for OSHA to make it. It's the only place I've seen in OSHA that makes the statement in that much clarity, because we will forget things. So we've got to start demanding refresher and continuing education training from our employers. We just have to, because we will not remember things that we have not done for a while. And we've got to demand it. And if we demand it, if we're looking out for number one and all of those around us, both at work and at home, and we're demanding that, we'll get it. And we'll be better people from it. And we'll be safer employees. So how does holding people accountable prevent incidents? Well, we've discussed that kind of ad nauseum here today. But folks, it doesn't hurt anybody to stand up and say, it's me. It was me. And even when nobody knows something happened, if we exhibit an unsafe behavior, we need to stop work and say, hey guys, I just did something unsafe. Now you guys didn't call me out on it, but, we can't get better if we don't, hold each other accountable, and it starts with me. So is being held accountable a negative thing? It's only on how you look at it, folks. I don't think there's anything negative about being held accountable. You can make all the excuses you want, but there's not a valid reason in my mind. There's nothing negative about it. But there are a lot of positives that can come from accountability. Number one, we're safer. And our workplaces and our coworkers are safer, because we've got to prevent those incidents. But number two, we gain a lot of respect, not just from other people, but when we look in the mirror at night and we ask ourselves, hey, have I done a good job today? We can nod our head yes and say, yeah, I stepped up, when I made a mistake. And I don't know anything more positive than that. So, excuse me, let's talk just a little bit about behavior. Can proper training and accountability positively change behavior? And of course the answer to that is yes. If we demand the training that we need and the retraining, the individual task training, and if we demand accountability of ourselves, it will change our behavior in a very positive way. As adults, that's our responsibility. We need to make it happen. And yes, it can have a negative effect. If we do something bad and we're disciplined for it, that could be negative, or that could be a positive thing. It's all on your outlook. It's all on how you see things. And positive outcomes occur if we include training and accountability into our everyday management of tasks and outcomes. And the answer is definitely yes. Are we going to slow work down? Because I can tell you, I've worked in the construction field, in the utility construction field some, and there, if you slow down to do something safer and do something in a safer way, sometimes you get yelled at. But folks, who are we going to be? Because it starts with us. If we don't hold ourselves to that standard, and if we don't, I've been fired twice in my career because I was holding myself and others accountable for safety, and I was impeding work. But I'll take those times, because it will make us better people, and we deserve it. We deserve to treat ourselves that way. We can and we will have fewer incidents when we properly train employees and hold them accountable. I promise you that if we do that, we're going to have a better workforce. We're going to have better and happier employees. Employees deserve to be properly trained and held accountable. There should be no disagreements with that. We've got to do it. So, as we go on today with our tasks and our things that we do, I'd like each of us to look at what we're doing and think, okay, well, did I do this the safest way possible, or am I exhibiting unsafe behavior? If you find that you're exhibiting unsafe behavior, well, why did I do it? Was it because I'm not properly trained? Or is it because I'm not being held accountable, or both? And then we need to tell ourselves, well, okay, we got to change this, and since the people around me is not changing it, it's up to me. I've got to make it happen. I've got to hold myself accountable, and I've got to help other people hold themselves accountable, because they deserve me looking out for them too, because I am my brother's keeper. So people and employees deserve to be properly trained and held accountable. That's just all there is to it. So, a couple of last slides here. Mindset. If you fail, never give up, because FAIL means first attempt in learning. It's okay to fail, but we've got to learn from our failures, our mistakes. And often ways, that's the best way of learning. And end is not the end. In fact, END means effort never dies. So if we don't put forth the effort to do things correctly and safely, that's on us, folks. That's just on us, because effort never dies. we're all going to make mistakes. But as we continue to try and be better, be safer, it'll benefit not only us, but those around us. And if you get no as an answer, remember, NO means next opportunity. So we've all got opportunities that come to us every day to be a better person, to do the right thing, to do it the safest thing. And it's all about mindset. Now, I learned a long time ago that I am in control of how my day turns out. So I start off every day with a ritual, and I try to be actively involved in everything I do every day to make sure that I have a good day no matter what happens, and that I work safely no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm flying on an airplane, driving down the road, or I'm teaching a class, or I'm out on the line, or I'm home mowing the lawn. We've got to do that for ourselves because we deserve that. We've got to change our mindset to where it's a good day and we're going to do the right thing each and every time that we can. And I've got a little slide here that I saw here a few years ago. It says, between yesterday's mistakes and tomorrow's hopes, there is a fantastic opportunity called today. Now, we can't do anything about yesterday or last week or last year, but we can do something about today and tomorrow and the next day. We've just got to do it. We don't have a choice, guys. Well, we do have a choice. But folks, today we have an opportunity to make positive change. I challenge you all to make positive change today and each and every day forward. So what's our most important task? It's save a life today. And that's so important. You got to start with our own. And then we got to save those around us. And we think, well, nobody's going to die around me. Well, how do you know? How do you know? We don't. So if we exhibit unsafe behavior, we got to correct ourselves because somebody else might not. But if you see unsafe behavior, you got to correct it. Just got to do it. Human life is too important. It's been my pleasure today to be here. It's not only been my pleasure, but it's my honor. I'm very honored to be part of ECOS, to help that message move forward. It is such an important thing in our industry. It's been so much overlooked for so long. It's just something that we can't ignore, and the more people that we get to think about this whole culture of safety, this whole mindset. I thank Brent and Bierer Meters for inviting me to be here, and I thank each and every one of you. You have a safe and a wonderful day, and we'll see you down the road.